certainly. We were waiting on you, Mr. Jackson.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we will call the meeting to order. I would thank everyone for being with us and hope that we have a very smooth and rewarding meeting. Madam Secretary, if you're still there, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. David Boggs,
Present.
Patty Cross,
Here.
Keith Lee,
Here.
Paul Looney,
Here.
Timothy Lusher,
Here.
William May,
Here.
Daryl Sanderson, Charles Stewart,
Here.
James Terrell, Russell Wright,
Here.
Chairman Jackson.
Here.
Quorum of 9.
All right. Well, since we have a quorum, Chair will entertain a motion with regard to the minutes from February 11th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the minutes of the February 11th meeting.
I'll second.
All
T.
right,
Cross.
we got a motion and a second. There are a couple of things that we probably need to be aware of that's in the minutes that probably need to deal with. On the very next to the last page, the paragraph that reads, Mr. Judah stated that Mr. Reed Bishop, that very last line implies that there may be something missing. The very last line, in with residents on the site and that. Madam Secretary, is there something missing there, or is that?
I'm reading it. Oh, yeah, I apologize for that. I needed to go back through the tape and look at it. So I will correct that and redo those for next meeting.
Okay. And on the very last page, the third paragraph from the very bottom, the sentence reading outline in the staff report, and is that contingent, C-O-N-T-I-N-G-E-N-T?
Yes, sir. That's a terrible typo right there.
Okay. So if in our motion, if the offerer of the motion don't mind, and the second wouldn't mind indicating that the secretary will make those corrections, then we'll be good.
Yes, that's fine with me, sir.
Me as well.
Okay, then we have a motion and a second that the minutes be approved with the necessary corrections. Is there discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. There being none, all in favor of the motion, vote aye.
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 Opposed likewise. Motion carries. Payment of bills. Chair will entertain a motion with regard to the payment of bills.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the bills as stated in the agenda and move to pay those bills.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that the bills in the revised agenda be paid.
Correct.
Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion.
Who seconded that?
Mr. Lusher,
I did first.
Mr. Looney did the second.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
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 Opposed likewise. Motion carries. Staff items.
Yeah, just to give the commission an update, as you all know, we put the comp plan RFP out on the city's website and also shared a link to it and a notice on the Kentucky chapter of the American Planning Association's website. That'll close on the 15th and we'll get to see what we've got. We got a set of questions from one firm just yesterday and put some responses back up on the website and had the city's purchasing officer also send those responses directly to that firm. So hopefully we'll get a bunch of responses and have a great bit of folks to choose from. Just wanted to give an update.
Okay. And you say it closes on the 15th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, hearing none. We'll move to the next item, which is old business. Madam Secretary, would you please call the first item under old business?
Yes, it's continuation of public hearing. Thin Glen Farm LLC is requesting approval of a zone map amendment from Rural Residential District RR to Agricultural District AG for 205 acres of property at 2100 Harvey Land Road. The tract is more specifically identified as PVA map number 046-00-00-007.00. This is a county item.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion to remove the item from the table to adopt the summary of the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I make the motion that we close public hearing and adopt the summary.
Second. We have a motion and a second that we remove the item from the table and adopt the summary, the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Logan.
did we also not receive from county staff the comments of an individual that attempted to participate in the public hearing but was unable to?
Yes, sir.
I would request that we include that information that was provided to all of you as part of the summary for consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion to include as part of the summary the emails that we received today from neighboring residents as part of the summary, please.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, the second accept, and therefore we have a motion and a second to remove the item from the table and to adopt the summary of the item, including communications from interested parties. I think Mr. Bishop is one of those individuals, and Robert, can you tell us who the other persons are, if there are any?
Only documentation from Mr. Bishop was submitted and provided today to the commission.
Okay. So, any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? There being none, all in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
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 Opposed likewise? Hearing none, seeing none, motion carries. The floor is now open for the offering and adoption of findings of fact with regard to this particular item.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I would like to make the motion to include the findings of fact, number 1 and number 2 on page 12 of the staff report.
second. I'll second it. Have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion for the adoption of the two findings of fact? Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the findings of fact, please vote aye.
Aye.
Likewise, hearing none, motion carries. Are there other findings of fact? Are there other findings of fact? There being none, the chair will offer a motion that the findings of fact cease.
So
There's
moved.
second. Moved and properly second that the findings of fact cease. Discussion on that motion? Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
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 Opposed likewise? Motion carries. Findings of facts now cease, and now the chair will entertain a motion to either approve and recommend to fiscal court that the zoning of the property be changed, or to not approve and that the zoning of the property be recommended for none change to fiscal court.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I would like to make a motion, but I would first would like to offer this. I want to make a motion for approval, but I would like to let my fellow commissioners know that the difference, the questions that we had from neighboring residences, you can do both those entities in RR or AG. There's really nothing other than some tax consequences and very else that they can do. The questions of somebody building something, you can build one piece of property for every acre and a half in Franklin County, and you can do that in RR or AG. And because of that, I would recommend approval of the zone map amendments from RR to AG for the 205 acres of property at 2100 Harvey Land Road. And they recommend approval to send to fiscal court.
I'll second.
been moved and properly second that the planning commission recommend to fiscal court the approval of zoning from RR to AG for 205 acres on Harborland Road. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion carries. Madam Secretary, if you would, please call the first item under public hearings.
Public hearing, text amendment to the City of Frankfort zoning ordinance to establish small cell tower system regulations.
Okay, Ms. Logan, I've got a quick question, and maybe it can't be done, I don't know. Items 1 and 2 on the public hearings are basically the same items, except the public hearing for the Frankfort portion of the ordinance is to expand the ordinance to accommodate small cell towers. The county portion of the public hearing for the text amendment is really to add the language that would permit the small cell towers. Is there any way we can combine those?
In my opinion, you can, but I do not recommend it because we are dealing with two separate entities and two separate recommendations, Mr. Chairman. And I would hate to confuse this if someone filed an appeal.
Okay. That answers my question. And therefore, I'll just ask that the secretary qualify the participants for item number 1. And then, Mr. Logan, if you don't mind, if you'll follow through on qualification as well, we'll get it underway.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cockley, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Eric, would you state your name for the record and your position with the City of Frankfort?
Eric Cockley, I'm the Director of the Planning and Community Development Department.
In your capacity with the City of Frankfort, have you reviewed and prepared a text amendment for consideration by the Planning Commission tonight?
I have.
And have you reduced your recommendation to writing?
I have.
Are there any additions or deletions you have with regard to this?
No, I have none.
Just briefly, it is a small background analysis and a small report and recommendation, but are there any statements you would like to make that may clarify this for members of the commission?
Not in particular, unless the commission would like a brief explanation from me so that the public knows what we're talking about.
Well, I think that would be in order.
Okay, I can do that. So what you have in front of you is a text amendment to add language to Article 6 of the city zoning regulations to deal with the placement and siting of what are referred to as small cell towers. Many of you may be familiar with the large typical cell towers that based upon the zoning regulations and other requirements come to you all for approval from time to time. And those are usually, we're talking, 100, 150, 200 foot tall towers that are used for typical cell phone signals up until now. With the advent of 5G technology, what we've seen and brought us to consider a text amendment for this was the utilization of these small cell towers. And so we're, on the advice of City Council for Telecommunications, we are not permitted to regulate them the same way as larger cell towers, which means that basically that's a blind spot for the city zoning regulations. So as they start coming in and asking for any permits necessary, we don't have a good mechanism for telling them where they can and can't go and under what conditions. So as that's coming up, as we all know, 5G technology is proliferating with cell phones. This was an attempt to get ahead of that and create some regulations. As mentioned before, we took this to the zoning update committee with the intention between Mr. Hewitt and myself of coming up with a set of standards that were the same in the two jurisdictions, as we often do. For simplicity's sake, the zoning update committee met many times to discuss this topic at length. And the result of that is what you have in front of you. So I'll leave it at that and answer any questions you may have.
Thank Copley. Mr. Chairman, I'd move that the report enter into the record.
Without objection. Eric, let me ask you to share with the commission in case they didn't see the fine print. What was the reaction of AT&T and Bell South, et cetera, to the establishment of the ordinance and how it would work?
Sure. So AT&T, who's one of the folks that had contacted us, that kind of helped start this process because they had some locations in town that they were hoping to install these. So we shared drafts of these regulations as we went to find out what portions of them they may have issues with, they may have technical questions about, so on and so forth. So that if we had any issues, we'd know it ahead of time, and we could either choose to work with them on that to avoid legal challenges, or at least know the battles that we'd have to fight. As we got down to the final edition of this, we submitted that version to AT&T one more time before bringing it back to the zoning update committee to finalize their recommendation of approval for this full body. And AT&T confirmed to myself and the zoning update committee that they had no problems with the language as we had drafted it. So I think that's a good thing.
Okay, were there any other organizations that we needed to pull into this conversation that we heard from?
No, at the advice of council, I believe we worked with AT&T directly since they had reached out to us about this technology. And that's the only response we got.
Okay. Does any other commissioner have a question of Mr. Copley?
Question, Chair.
Oh,
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
yes, sir, Mr. Mooney.
I was not familiar with what this meant. Mr. Copley, I appreciate your description. I had pulled up some photos to see these. It looks like they're a pretty wide variety of locations and aesthetics. Can you go over a little bit? And I just was noticing there is a section in the back about historic districts, but you know, aesthetics and how these things may look and how they may be controlled in historic districts. Can you go into that a little bit?
Mr. Copley, did you hear Mr. Looney's inquiry?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was looking for that part of the language. I forgot I was still on mute. Bear with me here. So, and of course, my computer's not being very helpful. So in our historic district, we have design guidelines that do have some language already that references some utility things and where they're located and things of that nature. So we have some ability to make some influence on those things through that. As far as how that relates specifically to the small cell towers, and this document is still not helping me out here. If you will, while I'm trying to get this document to not, it's blanking on me. If I could come back to that, look through this for a second, Commissioner Looney, and I'll come back to that with an answer for you here in a moment, if that works.
Okay, in the meantime, are there other questions that we can address while awaiting for Mr. Copley's response?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee?
while we're waiting, I just want to make the comment to the commission. You and I and some other people on this board have been on long enough to remember the first cell towers where there was multiple questions and multiple opposition for people not wanting it on a piece of land adjacent to them. And I would think probably the last 4 or 5 that have come up have been zero opposition and slam dunks. I would assume that something smaller and a little more attractive, in my opinion, would probably be accepted by the public in the same manner. If you have better reception and more bars, if you can hear me now, everybody's
Yeah.
for it.
Well, if commissioners have their printed agenda item, a broad description of a response to the question that Mr. Looney asked can be found on page 3 and page 4 and 5 of the agenda item, where it basically describes the placement and co-locations and those kinds of things for the small cell towers, placement in the right of way, those kinds of things. So it's covered in there, but not, it doesn't specifically deal with the question that Mr. Looney.
Yeah, I guess my general question, looking at photos online, some of these, it look like you can't even tell what it is, and some of them look like it's pretty obvious that it's a big fat array of small cells, I guess, and it's just, what, if we have control over that, in particular at downtown and historic districts, or what the intent is, that just anybody can put whatever they want that fits their budget, or will there be control over aesthetics in our community?
I'd actually jump in where Paul was, or to continue where Paul was talking, is I do believe that there's probably a inclination within the board to make these cell towers at least subject to the ARB regulations downtown regarding design, placement, location, et cetera, to basically avoid what Mr. Looney just described, or giant, or small arrays, not giant arrays, but at least make them as invisible as possible, and just to ensure that we do have some language in the amendment as it is.
Yeah, and it includes that. It references all the other, local regulations. So they would still be subject to the language contained within the design guidelines. And I would also reference, particularly in the downtown urban area, and even not just in downtown and South Frankfort where the historic districts are, but you'll also notice that we crafted the regulations to push the providers as much as possible to do what we call non-tower small cell systems, which essentially means find other locations to co-locate these equipment items on either existing poles, could be on the top of a building, something like that, where for a new cell, tower to be constructed. So that will, theoretically, we hope to mitigate as many of these as possible, except for ones that, because of search area, have no real choice or other piece of infrastructure that they can work with. Those would be the ones that'll end up building their new towers themselves.
Mr. Looney, does that get at your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Yes, thank you.
Other questions of staff, our commission members? And I can't see everyone, so I think you need to speak up if you have a question. I cannot see everyone. Okay, I don't hear anything. So is there anyone, quote unquote, in the public who wishes to speak with regard to this item? And I can't see it. I cannot see everyone. Hearing none. Next item that we would have on this would be to get a motion to close the public hearing and to act on this issue this evening. Unless Mr. Logan tell me I can't.
I think you can, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I make a motion that we close the public hearing, that we adopt the staff report in lieu of a summary, and we recommend to the city of Frankfort approval of the amendment of the city of Frankfort zoning ordinance to establish small cell tower system regulations.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second that the public hearing be closed, that the staff report be adopted as a summary, and that the commission recommend to the city commission that the expansion of the ordinance regarding small cell towers be adopted. Their discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. There being none, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. David Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright, Mr. Wright, Mr. Wright,
Yes, yes, I was muted.
thank you, and Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. And we will now go on to item 2 under public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, did we notice we have Mr. Sanderson with us now?
Well, I didn't. I can't see everyone.
Okay. I just noticed that he had joined us, and I wanted to make sure that Madam Secretary knew.
Madam Secretary, would you call Mr. Sanderson for the previous item? Make sure that he's included there.
Yes, Mr. Sanderson.
I'm trying to say, yeah, I'm good. I'm trying to get it to work.
Okay. So does that mean that I have 10?
Sure do.
All right. Let's do item 2 under public hearings.
Give me just a second. Public hearing, text amendment to the Franklin County zoning ordinance to establish small cell tower system regulations. Mr. Hewitt, if you're, raise your right hand, do you swear to or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Hewitt, would you state your name and position for the record, please?
Robert Hewitt, Director, Franklin County Planning and Building Codes Department.
And in your capacity as director, did you review and make a recommendation with regard to the changes for the small cell systems in Franklin County?
Yes,
And did you recommend approval of the proposed text amendment? Now, would you briefly indicate what your amendment does, which is different from the city's?
thank you. I'd like to first start out by thanking Eric Cockley and the city of Frankfort for their assistance in taking the lead in the creation of this amendment. Their ability to retain professional consulting services on this was greatly beneficial to the city, the county, and the community. So the document prepared by the county with assistance of the zoning update committee is basically essential. I'd like to point out the largest difference, which is what Mr. Looney questioned about relating to historic districts. The county's report does not have language specific to historic districts because the county has none. Otherwise, the regulations relating to placement, siting, technology and like for residential and non-residential are the same. I believe the filing fees are the same. City and county staff worked very hard in our attempt to make the regulations as similar as possible while recognizing our unique differences in governments. So with the numerous meetings that we've had with the zoning update committee, as well as members of the public, I am recommending approval of this text to create section 6.0 of the Franklin County zoning ordinance.
Are there any other additions or deletions that you would have to your report and recommendation?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the report be filed into the record.
Without objection. At this point, since basically the two text amendments are the same, the difference really being that Franklin County does not have a ordinance section 6.11, and the city of Frankfort already had it. If there are no questions of Mr. Hewitt, then the chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Well, I can't do that. Need to ask if there's someone in the public who wishes to speak with regard to this item. And I'll remind you all, I can't see everyone, so someone has to speak up if there's someone out there. Hearing none, etc. Chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing, to adopt the summary, and to recommend approval or non-approval to fiscal court.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Ms. Cross,
I would move that we close the public hearing and we adopt the staff summary, and we recommend to the Franklin County Fiscal Court the approval of the text amendment to Article 6 of their zoning ordinance to establish section 6.11 relating to small cell towers and related equipment.
there's a second.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Are there questions on the motion? Questions on the motion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Unanimous.
motion passes. So that's great work under that's taken care of. Madam Secretary, would you call number 3?
Yes, public hearing, text amendment to the Franklin County zoning ordinance. Table of permitted uses relating to the addition of dance halls, studios, and schools, parentheses, reception, assembly hall in the agricultural and rural residential zone districts. Mr. Hewitt, are you still sworn?
I
Or
believe
do I need to swear him back in?
No, he's fine.
Thank you.
Mr. Hewitt, once again, will you state your name for the record, please?
Robert Hewitt,
And your position with County of Franklin.
Director of Planning and Building Code.
And tonight, have you prepared a staff report with regard to a text amendment to the table of permitted uses for Franklin County?
Yes.
Have you reduced that to writing?
Yes.
And are there any additions or deletion to this staff report that you prepared?
No, sir.
Would you briefly indicate what the result is of your recommendation?
Yes, sir. For many years, there have been requests and business license applications for activities such as reception halls, assembly halls, places of gathering. The Franklin County Land Use Table, based on the old SIC classification system, did not specify an assembly hall or a reception hall, even though we all kind of knew what they were. The closest the county staff could find was dance hall, studios, and schools, item 651 in the table. So that was an interpretation by staff to accommodate as much as possible. There is and has been a trend for many years now for gatherings in rural type settings, such as barn weddings, outdoor gatherings, events, barn dances, and the like, that have become very popular as destination weddings and the like. So I did some research into adjacent counties such as Scott and Shelby, in which those activities do occur. In some communities, they are recognized and regulated. In other cases, they are not. I thought it'd be interesting and important for this community to recognize them so that it could be an activity promoted through tourism, but also we could help to ensure safety for those who participate in those. So with that being said, I presented this to the zoning update committee to add this agricultural and rural residential zoning districts, as well as permitted in the highway commercial district with no special condition. It does include an amendment to the text with this area highlighted, in which reception and assembly hall basically serves as a subcategory of a dance hall, studio, and schools. So with it being as a conditional use in the agricultural and rural residential, that would require review by the Board of Zoning Adjustments, but it would serve as a permitted use in the highway commercial zoning district, allowing administrative approval. So with that being said, the Zoning Update Committee has recommended that this be brought before the Planning Commission for consideration. Staff recommends approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that the staff report be filed into the record for consideration by the committee.
So ordered. Mr. Hewitt, were there any comments from other interested parties with regard to this text amendment that you're aware of?
Yes, sir. There was legal counsel representing some individuals who I believe is on the meeting tonight. I believe that's Mr. Jones. Are you to testify before the commission?
Yes, Mr. Hewitt, I'm here.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be appropriate for me to speak now?
I got to do one other thing, Mr. Jones, before
Yes.
permitting you to speak, and that's I didn't ask my planning commission members if they had any questions of Mr. Hewitt.
Mr. Chairman, just remind you, he needs to be sworn in, please.
Okay,
I had
Mr.
a question,
Jones?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Looney.
Mr. Hewitt, I was curious, and maybe it's obvious, and I'm just too new to know the difference. Why it wasn't included under CL or CG as a permitted use?
CL is more of a neighborhood type zoning classification. I see that zoning as a means to provide more neighborhood type services such as a barber shop, beauty shop, maybe a small corner store. I didn't believe that the volume of an assembly hall would be appropriate in that proximity to a neighborhood. General commercial could have been a possibility. Once again, it sometimes serves as a buffer between residential and the higher intensity highway commercial. I thought highway commercial was much more appropriate because it's generally along arterial roadways. And this activity would likely want that exposure on a main roadway. So I wanted to provide as much separation for these large groups, also because it probably include a larger parking lot or parking need. So I feel much more comfortable trying to keep it out of the residential area, high density residential as possible.
Good for me. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt.
Other question by commissioners, please?
Mr. Hewitt, I do have a question following up Mr. Looney's comments. With regards to CL, being assembly halls and reception halls, this is future use. Would it be possible that these halls be attached to locations such as hotels, boutique hotels, etc., that would be in a more residential area? And I'm thinking in downtown terms, where we have a number of CL, my brewery in particular is in a CL classification. And I'm just wondering why. Like I said, once again, I guess I can see incidences coming up that in that particular zone that it probably should be a condition. I could see incidences where it should be a conditional use, given kind of where the downtown area is growing in particular.
Well, this text amendment is only applicable to properties outside the city limits.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, that completely answers my question then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions by commissioners? Hearing none, seeing none. Mr. Jones, if you're still with us. Well,
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind, you can go ahead and make your comments at this time, please, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Charlie Jones. I was approached by John and Megan Gilbert about the possibility of a kind of event barn, a wedding barn in the county. And after we'd researched the possibilities and some other counties, we did approach Robert Hewitt a couple months ago about this possibility and found out that Robert was at the same time looking at the issue himself. And so we worked with him a little bit, but he was already moving forward with this. So I and my clients are obviously pleased that it's before the commission and hope that you'll support it. We agree with staff report on the conditional use in AG and RR, and hope that you'll approve this text amendment for the county.
Okay, does any commissioners have questions of Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of concerned with the fact of where they would be located in relationship to the roads and stuff that would be supplying them. What are the restrictions going to be, Mr. Jackson, as far as we allowing the different facilities to be developed and maybe the roads not be developed that lead to them adequately?
Is that for me or Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jones?
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Sanderson, it was our understanding and belief that that was the reason it was a conditional use and not permitted. because that would be one of the elements that would have to be brought up when you went to get your conditional use, and they would look at an issue such as that and address it more or less on a case-by-case basis, because it as you can appreciate, it's kind of hard to put some of these blanket requirements on someplace they're different. So we always thought, and I thought that was Mr. Hewitt's thinking as well, that when these came up before BZA, those issues on a particular applicant would then be addressed.
Chairman Jackson, if I could address Mr.
Yeah.
Sanders' question as well. So what I have on the screen for you right now is Article 15, specific to conditional uses in the unincorporated areas of the county. And once again, the reason I ask it to be conditional is because these are the minimum conditions that have to be addressed both by staff and the Board of Zoning Adjustments or commission, however the case may be, to ensure compatibility of a use with its surroundings. So in 15.011, that criteria specifically states, quote, that street or road capacity and condition is adequate to serve anticipated additional traffic. So right here, we've got traffic covered, we've got public facilities are available, we've got the use is in accordance with the intent of the district where it would locate, it would have no adverse effect on the adjacent properties, appropriate screening is provided, there's provisions for signage limitations, compliance with the comprehensive plan, and any other condition that the board or commission may deem appropriate based on the unique details of the property or the activity. So by bringing it as a conditional use, it allows direct notification to adjacent property owners, as well as publication in the newspaper for anyone who may want to come to either support or have objection to a given use at its location.
Thank you, Robert.
Mr. Sanderson, this is Ed Logan.
Yes, sir.
I think this is appropriate. Conditional use is appropriate because it's hard to shoehorn everything into a particular description. If you give the Board of Zoning Adjustment a review of it, they can better analyze each case by case and make a decision. So I think that is an appropriate route to go with.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Jones? Seeing none, hearing none. Is there anyone else in the public arena that have a question regarding this item or would like to speak with regard to this text amendment? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. We're at the point where Chair will entertain a motion, close the public hearing, adopt the staff report as a summary of the public hearing, and then add an action by the fiscal court. But before we go forward, Mr. Logan, since Mr. Jones made a presentation, does that remove us from being able to act tonight on this item?
No, sir, I do not believe it does.
Okay. Now, Chair will entertain a motion.
Oh, Lord.
Ms. Cross.
Okay. I have one quick question, and then I will move. Does Mr. Jones have to be sworn?
No, ma'am, he does not. As an attorney representing parties, he may give testimony in this quasi-judicial proceeding. They decided that many years ago in a Louisville case that went to the Supreme Court.
Okie doke.
So that doesn't mean we trust him
move.
any more than any other attorney, correct? It's just,
Well,
he's-
it would be hard to hear Mr. Jones. That's the only reason I don't want to get into that.
thank you, Mr. Logan.
Okay. I would move that we close the public hearing, that we adopt the staff report in lieu of, and that we send it to the fiscal court with our recommendation for approval for conditional use of in the AG and RR zoning districts and permitted in the highway commercial for reception and assembly halls.
Second.
I was muted there. I'm sorry. I have a motion and a second that the public hearing be closed, that the staff report be adopted in place of a summary, and that a recommendation be made to fiscal court that the ordinance be expanded to include conditional and permitted uses for assembly and reception halls. Are there questions with regard to the motion? Questions with regard to the motion? There being none, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson. Chairman Jackson. Chairman Jackson.
You're muted.
God, trying to do it right and forget everything else. Yes,
Chairman
Yes, ma'am.
Jackson.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you. That means I can't ever criticize anybody else for being muted, so we got that underway. Madam Secretary, would you please call the next item on the public hearing?
Public hearing, text amendment to the Franklin County zoning ordinance, table of permitted uses relating to the addition of mini warehouse, self-storage facilities in the general commercial and highway commercial zoning district.
Mr. Hewitt, will you testify on this matter? Mr. Hewitt?
Did we lose him?
Sorry, I was on mute as well.
Mr. Hewitt, you've been sworn previously tonight. Would you state your name and position for the record, please?
Robert Hewitt, Director, Planning and Building Codes Department for Franklin County.
And once again, did you prepare a staff report with regard to amending the permitted uses chart of the zoning ordinance in Franklin County to cover mini warehouse self-storage facility?
Yes.
This appears to be fairly straightforward. Are there any additions or deletions you have to your recommendation and report?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. And you did recommend approval of the text amendment as submitted,
Yes.
and that was after review by the update committee?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. Mr. Chair, I'd move the staff report be introduced in lieu of additional testimony in this matter.
So ordered. Is there any one in the public sector that wishes to speak to this item?
Yes, this is Melanie Van Houten,
Okay.
and I believe, I just want to make sure I'm speaking at the right time, but is this specifically in regards to the storage units that are proposed to be on 127 South, adjacent to the sculpture park?
Yes, you may speak.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure how much, or is that correct, Chairman Jackson?
I didn't hear your question.
Okay, I thought somebody said that I wasn't allowed to speak, so I just was making
No,
sure.
I didn't, Mr. Chair, I mean, this is on a text amendment. It's not anything specific. She can certainly speak in regards to the text amendment, but I would think on an individual thing that would come before the board at a different time.
Yeah.
She certainly has it all within her rights to speak for or against this amendment, but I think for something specific, and unless Mr. Logan, unless I'm out of thing, it needs to be in regards to the text amendment, not something specific, in my opinion, but I just want to point that out.
I'm going to ask Mr. Hewitt. I saw no specific mention to a 127 project, and that's what I was going to ask.
You are correct, Mr. Logan. This is a text amendment for the unincorporated areas of Franklin County.
All right, thank you, sir. Then I think Ms. Van Houten can make a statement with regard to what she likes or dislikes about the text amendment, but we don't know whether it applies to any specific area of 127 or not.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was on I haven't seen the agenda, so I wasn't sure. Is there a point this evening where I would be able to speak specifically about that proposed project?
I see nothing on the agenda about 127.
I don't either.
What are you specifically relating to that you want to speak about?
Well, several people mentioned to me that there were storage units that were going to be built adjacent to our property. And I've spoken to the property owners about that as well. And they said they are doing that. And that Mr. Greider was the engineer working on all of that project. And I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to speak about that as the primary neighbor to that.
Well,
project.
if that's on the agenda for public hearing, you certainly will be. But the approval of this text amendment does not specifically approve any item like that.
Okay, well, that's what I was asking. Again, I haven't seen the agenda, so I
certainly
wanted to make sure when I could speak. So
certainly, thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lee.
I do have one question. Am I correct that nothing, any storage building on 127 that comes up, there's nothing in this text amendment that we're doing tonight that would not prohibit the public from commenting on that? We're not, this text amendment is just as a generic change. It does not change. I just want for the record that it does not change any proposed construction, and anybody in the public will have opportunity to voice it. I think, this doesn't automatically let a storage building go on 127, so let's go through all the proper channels. I just wanted to put that on the record, please.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And we wanted to make that clear as well. I would presume that at some point, a development plan of some kind will be placed on the commission's agenda with regard to those items, and then members of the public would be given an opportunity to speak to them. You are correct.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, what is the time? Mr. Chairman, what is the timeline for this being approved? So it would go, this amendment, if it's approved tonight, would go to the fiscal court in what, May or June? Do you know what the timeline would be on that?
Mr. Hewitt?
I would anticipate the earliest this item would appear before the fiscal court would be a May meeting with a second reading of the ordinance potentially in June. I don't have their calendar in front of me specifically, but I could look it up really quick. But May would be the earliest.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, please?
Yeah, I would like to comment if I could, please.
Okay, I'm not able to see you, so.
Okay, this is Joe Grider, and
Okay,
I was, so you may remember, I guess back in January, I was participated in that text amendment. I guess it was a zoning ordinance update committee meeting.
yes,
And this
sir.
text amendment was discussed there. And at the time, when we just talked about the 100-foot buffer that was originally proposed, I thought that maybe we decided that just to be, for the sake of being consistent with what the city requires, that be changed to a 30-foot buffer from any residential zone.
And Mr. Jackson, yes, sir, Mr. Jackson, I don't have my notes with me specific to that. I apologize. If the zoning update committee did recommend 30 feet, I have no objection to modifying item B under noted special condition 7. I may have overlooked that change.
If the change if we need to make a change and it's not a part of the text amendment as we have it and it's been advertised, Ms. Logan, do we need to table this issue until those changes can be made and then brought back?
Mr. Chairman, yes, because if we advertise this at a particular distance, and if we're changing that, it needs to be re-advertised and heard. We don't know who may have objected to it if the distance has changed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, with that being said, I make the motion that we table this item before us, period.
Second.
Moved and properly second that the item currently before the commission be tabled for modification and brought back to the commission for a public hearing. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. There being none, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, this item is tabled until the modifications can be made and re-advertised and placed on our agenda for another meeting. Madam Secretary, if you would.
Public hearing, text amendment to the Franklin County zoning ordinance definitions, table of permitted uses and noted special conditions relating to the addition of short-term rentals in agriculture, residential, and commercial districts.
Good. Once again, you've been sworn tonight. Would you indicate your name and position with the County of Franklin?
Director of Planning and Building Codes Department.
And as Director of Planning and Building Codes, did you review amendments to Articles 3 and 4 of the Franklin County zoning ordinance with regard to short-term rentals?
Yes.
And did you, in your capacity as director, make recommendations on staff report tonight for approval of the text amendment?
Yes.
Would you briefly indicate what your recommendations are?
Yes, sir. This item would be in addition to the current zoning ordinance. This is not a bed and breakfast because that regulation currently exists. A short-term rental in the county's interpretation or amendment will be a non-owner occupied use of a dwelling. It doesn't constitute a bed and breakfast because the owner of that dwelling would not be present, nor is a meal served to the guest. I am recommending that this activity occur as a conditional use in the agricultural district, as well as the following residential districts that permit single-family dwellings. That would be rural residential, RA, residential A district, residential B, RB, residential C, RC, residential RS, and planned residential. The short-term rental is often known as a vacation rental by owner or an Airbnb, things of that nature. So those are very popular. Staff is aware that they are occurring in our community. There are transient room tax dollars that are not being captured by the county at this time because these activities are not being permitted under a business license application. So this was presented to the zoning update committee along with assistance by the tourism director, Robin Antonucci, that I believe is on our meeting tonight. I can double check.
I'm here.
Okay, great. And I will be calling on Robin here shortly. But as part of this amendment, I have proposed some conditions on the activity. Now, this amendment is very similar to the city's, but not exactly the same. The city has some additional requirements that did not propose within the county. I do provide a definition. That's why there's an amendment to Article 3. I have a brand new noted special condition number 28 that outlines in detail the length of the stay, contract, the need for an inspection and number of persons there. All these items that are in your packet are things to ensure safety, to ensure that we're aware of the activity. And also, I think one of the most important things is aside from collecting the tax dollars, but also that item J, that we are to be notified if they ever decide to cease operation, so that we have a hold on a single family dwelling or a dwelling unit where there may or may not be increased activity. So we do recognize increased activity. We can check to see if it is a short-term rental. If not, then that may indicate that some other activity may be going on. So it just helps us advise the neighbors. It helps us keep control of uses in neighborhoods, helps us collect taxes, and everyone on the same playing field since we know what's happening. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I would strongly encourage the commission to call upon Robin Antonucci this evening and speak to her about this activity, because I know she works very closely with the city of Frankfort and their ordinance.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Hewitt?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the staff report and recommendation be entered into the record.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Hewitt.
He's muted.
Mr. Lee.
Mr. Hewitt, I just want for the record to make sure it says it's limited to 29 consecutive days. I know people the term rental could be, I want to make sure it's defined correctly, because we have people that go to Elkhorn Campground that technically rent that space, but certainly stay more than 29 days, as well as other campgrounds, Strohmeyer, whatnot. I just want for the record to make sure that this before us does not apply to those entities.
You are correct. Campgrounds are a different animal.
Okay, thank you. That's my question. The other thing is, the other question I have, please, Mr. Chairman, if somebody has an Airbnb or they're renting it, for the Bourbon Trail or for whatever purpose, and that's becoming more and more popular, I guess because the 29-day thing is at that time, it becomes a whole different it's not a temporary, it's a full-time, and then it has to be insured and zoned in that manner if it's over 29 days. Is that, am I way off base, or is that kind of the premise of this?
Robin can provide, or Ms. Antonucci can provide more detail, but I believe that changes the tax implications under the transient room activity.
Yeah. Yeah, there is,
Wait just a moment.
Yeah.
Antonucci, let's let the questions end with Mr. Hewitt and let you be sworn in so we can get testimony clear on the.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hewitt, I'm fine to have Mr. Andrews answer at the proper time. I just want to make sure we're not limiting any, we're not handcuffing or limiting some entrepreneurial entity in the county. And I'll wait for Mr. Andrews. Thank you.
If I could expand on Mr. Lee's statement, unlike the city of Frankfort, Franklin County does not have a rental property inspection program. So by defining and providing regulations for short-term rentals, we are able to recognize those income producing properties that are geared towards travel and tourism. So we can separate that concept from people who just want to go rent a home or rent an apartment for, during the legislative session or for even a longer period, your typical 6-month or 1-year term. So this helps recognize the unique industry that has become very popular, as you indicated, Mr.
Sure. And Mr. Hewitt, I appreciate that answer. I do know that, for example, somebody might have a whole different area. Florida, you got some you're trying to rent weekly, and somebody makes you an offer to rent it for 6 months, which may or may, which could possibly happen in Frank County. We're not handcuffing anybody. Any landlord or somebody trying to be entrepreneurial with this amendment.
Yes, sir. And to assist with clarification, Franklin County has a separate occupational tax ordinance specific to income rental of residential property. So there is a ceiling on the amount of net profits from a rental. And if I'm not mistaken, the bar is set pretty high. So this text amendment would not impact or affect the traditional rental of residential property or commercial property, for that matter, from anyone that's doing that today. This only captures the short-term activities and allows us to collect transient room tax and be aware of where these homes are in the event that concerns with activities of people coming and going from the home.
Mr. Hewitt, you've answered my question. Mr. Chairman, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Could we swear in Ms. Antonucci?
Ms. Antonucci, would you raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Robin, would you give your name and your position with the city of Frankfort for us?
My name is Robin Antonucci, and I am the Executive Director of the Franklin County Tourist Commission.
Thank you very much. If you would like to make a statement or please go forward.
I would just agree with what has been said by Mr. Hewitt and appreciate your consideration of this. It's an important step for us in the collection of the transient room tax by short-term rental properties, and evens the playing field. There are many that are abiding by the state law, and some that may not be aware of that, and this will help in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay. Does commissioners have questions of Ms. Antonucci or Mr. Hewitt?
Yes, I have one, Ms. Antonucci, and this may have come up in the last, when you spoke this last time. Now, would this also allow if someone had a grocery store to rent 2 rooms upstairs or 2 rooms in the back, or does it have to be a standalone unit? Or is there, what are the restrictions on what kind of structure or building that they can do this? Does it have to be a house, or is it?
No, it does not have to be a house. Short-term rentals can be, I mean, unless Mr. Hewitt has some restrictions that I'm not aware of, but currently within our county, there are, basically a single family home that is serving as a short-term rental, and there are apartment type units serving as short-term rentals. So if that answers the question properly.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
does
Mr.
not
Wright,
include hotel or motel rooms, bed. Okay, go.
yeah,
Excuse me.
not hotel motels, but as long as the facility is classified as a residential dwelling, then it's applicable. So you couldn't use a cardboard as a short-term rental, or you couldn't use a storage unit in your backyard.
Right.
That wouldn't apply.
But you could, like a mobile home, if you had it sitting there, that would qualify too, or jet
Yes,
stream up on blocks or whatever was stable there, and you consider it a resident, it could be used.
Yes, sir. If it were a mobile home, a stick-built, single-family detached, yes, that would apply.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Looney.
Mr. Hewitt, the condition I says subject to a annual registration. Is there a fee? Is that a fee-based registration?
No, sir, that was not discussed. The fee associated with this activity would be that of a business license. That does come with a $40 fee.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none, hearing none, are there other members of the public who wish to speak? Make an inquiry with regard to this item? If not, then the chair will entertain a motion to close the public hearing. I'm presuming we can adopt the staff report as a summary of the public hearing and make a recommendation to fiscal court to either approve or to not approve the proposed text amendment. Everyone should speak up at once.
Mr. Chair, I move we close the public hearing, adopt the staff report as summary, and recommend approval to fiscal court the amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding short-term rentals as presented.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Been moved and properly second that we close the public hearing, adopt the staff report as a summary of the public hearing, and recommend to fiscal court the amendment to the Franklin County zoning ordinance, Article 3.01, 4.05, and 4.06 regarding short-term rentals. Are there any discussions regarding this motion? Discussion regarding the motion? If not, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain because I do have rental property in the county that may or may not be affected by this vote. So I request I abstain, please.
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes with one abstention.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Lee. Even though I don't think you had to abstain, it's a good thing that you did. Thank you very much. Looking at the agenda, there are no more items to come before the Planning Commission. And we will offer the commission members an opportunity to make any comment they need to make to the commission for the good of the organization. Hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Undebatable. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
No time.